Hello and welcome to the Penalty Box Perspective podcast. My name is Nathaniel, and yes, I am joined once again by my good friend Matt. How are you doing?
Yeah, all right, Joey Tribbiani, just coming in straight off the bat there. Jesus Christ.
How are
Yeah,
you doing?
I certainly am here. Yeah, I'm very good, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing good.
Oh God,
Um,
off to an absolute heater.
Absolute. Do you know what it is, mate? It's because McDonald's have announced a new menu in the UK, and for some reason they're bringing in adult Happy Meals, um, with where you can get Friends. It's like Friends related.
Oh,
So they had the
okay.
Grinch one recently, and now it's going to be Friends. So you can collect
Was
all your six Friends dolls and stuff like that. So it must be on my mind.
oh fun. Yeah. It must yeah, just right at the front of your brain.
Yeah,
Oh God, yeah, off to an absolute flyer. Yeah, no, I'm all good on this end, mate. Yeah, you all okay?
yeah. It's a big night of hockey last night. I can't wait to talk about it on the next big episode. Lots of weird and strange, wonderful results. Some great hockey being played. But on this episode, we're actually going to be talking about something a little bit different, a little bit maybe controversial.
Yeah, or certainly subjective, I would go to say. I mean, I think we're going to be talking about refereeing today in the NHL. Something that I think, as UK fans, I think there's certainly certain nuances to the way that that hockey is refereed, where it's certainly a lot different, I think, to how other sports are refereed. Certainly, I've never kind of witnessed anything kind of quite like the NHL when it comes to the officiating, just with all the kind of off the off the record stuff that happens. But yeah, there was kind of a certain incident that I know we're gonna touch on that just kind of brought it to my attention, and just thought it'd be a good topic of conversation.
Yeah, I mean it's always going to be a hot topic, a conversation, and as we deep dive it a bit and go through certain things, it's one of them things where I don't think no matter what happens, there will be certain elements of people that aren't happy with how their team or how their players or anything are officiated. But as we go through certain points, there are some interesting conversations to be had. I think.
Yeah, for sure. And look, this has all been brought around. There was a certain incident that took place recently in a game involving Carolina, where Taylor Hall gets boarded. Checked from behind, face first into the boards. For me, it was quite the potential to be a very dangerous play. I think you look at someone like Taylor Hall, who's obviously had a bit of a history of injuries, and fortunately he was okay. No penalty called on. I believe it was Dylan Cousins who made the check from behind. Taylor Hall, presumably baffled, just kind of gives a little bit to the referee, and then he ends up with a 10-minute game misconduct penalty for unsportsmanlike conduct, which was just a bit baffling. I think to everyone. I think it baffled the commentators. I think all the people watching the game. Taylor Hall himself was absolutely livid. And yeah, I think I know we spoke about you saw that play as well.
Yeah, I did see that play, and I mean, there's a big push in across sports really of not giving the referees shit, like in the middle of the game kind of thing. Dissent. We like to present our sports people as role models and not shouting and swearing at referees when they get a call wrong, etc. and things like that. But for me, that one hit a bit differently, where it's not a case of they thought like they should have been offside or that it's a bit of a loose penalty. You physically get checked into the boards, like you've been assaulted in one way or the other, and you get up, and your immediate reaction would be to question what the fuck,
Yeah,
and then to
yeah,
get thrown out. Not even a warning. It wasn't like it was consistent. He didn't chase down the ref necessarily. It was skating side by side as they were going to the back to wherever the puck was or anything like that, and it was called within a few seconds. It wasn't prolonged. It wasn't consistent. It was a quick back and forth conversation. It seemed like. No, I'm not sure exactly what the words he said. I think he could have said something really quite bad,
Yeah, I'm
but
sure. I'm
still,
sure it was something unsavoury, wasn't it? You know, I'm sure he's probably, you know, he's maybe effed and blinded you know, at the referee. But yeah, it wasn't a prolonged thing. It wasn't drawn out. Literally, the ref blew straight up, gave him the penalty, and you know that was that. And you know, we're not here to just bash refs for the next kind of 40 minutes. You know, we're analysing what they, you know, what they do, and you know, look, hockey is a really really tough sport to officiate. You know, you're trying to keep track of you know, a small piece of vulcanized rubber. You've got guys moving all over the ice, a lot of stuff happening. You know, so I'm not saying by all means it's easy, and people are human and they will make mistakes. But just that one was, you know, was absolutely, I was floored by, you know, by the decision made by the referee. And I think that kind of leads into, there's a lot of kind of unspoken rules, isn't there, when it comes to refereeing in hockey, and you know, things like game management, and you know, things that I think the league just kind of like pretends doesn't exist, but you know, we all know it's there. We see it night in, night out. You know, in terms, you know, when I talk about game management, you kind of aware of what I'm referring to?
yeah, it's trying to make things, try to bring teams closer together for the most part. It's just kind of create like for lack of a better term, it's creating an entertainment product that's close rather than, yeah. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah,
I think
so
I've
like
just made it even more confusing.
just as an example, you know, if what one team might give away three, you know, really blatant, you know, like a tripping call, a slashing call, and then a boarding, for example. So one team is playing, you know, whether you want to call it overly physical, but you know, they're breaking the rules, you know, within the game. And then, you know, so often the referees will try and like even the game up. So the other team will end up being, you know, they'll end up getting called for a penalty that'll be really, really soft. You know, really soft. And that's kind of with the referees in mind of going, you know, well, I've called three penalties against that team, so I'm going to call one against your team just to kind of like even the playing field a little bit, and, you know, try and make sure that it doesn't end up kind of being too one sided. But it's like, but if you've got one team blatantly committing penalties, then you know, you shouldn't need to go and even it up, because then you're almost just kind of rewarding the team that's committing all these penalties by giving them like a bit of a freebie. And I don't, you know, the league would never say that this is something that happens on a night to night basis. I know that fans hate it, but we see it in almost every NHL game that's played. So, you know, clearly it's not just individual referees trying to make that decision. It seems to be like a league wide sort of issue.
Yeah. No, it's this is the thing. This is a subjective conversation because nothing's actually stated, nothing's ever proved. But that's part of the potentially part of the issue. And I know playing one of the reasons I don't play sports games online these days, unless it's with my friends, is that the game can feel scripted,
Yeah.
and you can almost predict what's going to happen, even though there's nothing else controlling it. And it's one thing in a video game, but in real life sport, there's money on the line, and I don't want to get into gambling and things like that, but even just these professional athletes playing professional sport and any kind of shenanigans like that, really, for me, it should be straight up. Like, it should be clear cut for the most part. But, yeah.
Yeah, I think there's an aspect of it as well that's, you know, don't want to kind of use the term insulting the fans' intelligence at all, but you know, I think there certainly is an angle of it where, like you said, it's never been proven, it's never been acknowledged by the league. Again, they kind of never would, but you see it, and you know, I see it in just watching a game on TV. Let alone all the fans that have actually sort of, you know, travelled to, you know, to be there. And you know, if a team ends up scoring on the power play off of a penalty that was just like a, you know, a proper soft one called by the referee to kind of try and, you know, even things out a little bit over the game, there are massive implications to that. You know, like you said, it's the biggest hockey league in the world. And again, not to kind of touch on the gambling thing, but that there is a lot of kind of like money riding on it, not only for your everyday person, but also for the teams involved. There's implications to playoff pushes and point standings and everything like that. So I just think it's a little bit, it's almost worse than inconsistency for me. You accept that the odd call's going to get missed now and then, but calling penalties for the sole purpose of kind of trying to even the game out. I mean, you would just. I've never seen that in any other sport. You think certainly things like the Premier League or things like that. It's something that you don't really see. Not in my opinion, anyway. From referees in other sports.
Yeah. No, absolutely. It's more done on a feel basis rather than necessarily sticking by the rules. Like they get the taste and the flavour of the game and things like that. And it's maybe that Taylor Hall incident. I mean, he might have been chirping off all the times before that. We don't know. But if it's like a highly emotionally charged game, there's lots of big hits going in. Everyone's sort of tensions are raised, and that the emotions aspect may get involved. And they may be making judgment calls on whether to give penalties or not based on emotions and how they're feeling at the time, kind of thing. But this is what I meant about earlier about sort of consistency. It's the rules are there to be enforced, regardless of whether it's soft or hard. um,
Oh yeah,
if it's a penalty, it's kind of like a penalty, and people then can't argue with it if it is a penalty. If that makes sense. Like if everything's called, and obviously there might be played a game where it's constantly on power plays and stuff like that. That might then have to get figured out. But I mean, the rules are there to be enforced, really.
yeah, yeah, and it is such a a difficult. And by all means, we're not putting kind of tinfoil hats on or anything like that, and just and trying to sort of manifest conspiracy theories or anything like that. But it is something that you see around the league all of the time, and consistency is difficult when it's people making those decisions, and like you said, potentially maybe Taylor Hall was giving it to the referee all night long, and just getting in his ear for every little sort of thing, and then maybe that decision for him to sort of chirp off at him was maybe the final straw. But yeah, I thought that one in particular was absolutely wild. Um,
Yeah.
so in terms of when you see refereeing as well, and again, this is something that fans notice every year. It's never acknowledged. It's never really something that's brought up, but there is definitely a difference in how the games are refereed between the regular seasons and the playoffs. Again, that's kind of my opinion. I don't know if do you agree with that? I think I think they in the playoffs especially they let a lot more go. And a lot of things just kind of tend to fall by the wayside, and there's significantly less penalties called.
Yeah. I think that's reinforces the conversation we've just been talking about, where they don't want to necessarily impact a really serious moment in a game, because you referee one game on a Tuesday night in the regular season. It's one of 82 games. So if if a call gets missed or if a decision gets made, then obviously if you average out over the year, typically speaking, you might see everything sort of average out. Whereas in these playoffs, where every single game counts, you don't want to be making these calls on potentially like game changing effects in the playoffs.
Yeah, but like, why is that though? Because like the rules don't change. From the regular season to the playoffs. It's still the same rule book. It's still the same. I don't know if it comes from a place of fear from the referees, from like you said, sort of not wanting to. If it's game 7 or something, and potentially you have an opportunity to put a team on the power play with a couple of minutes left in the third period, you potentially are impacting the game massively there. But for me, they breach the rules. They breach the rules. Like cross
Yeah.
checking's a massive one. There's tons of cross checking in the playoffs that just seemingly goes completely unnoticed, and it shouldn't just because the games are at a higher stake. It shouldn't mean that all of a sudden you just kind of let things go because, and there's a way sort of broader conversation that I'm not, don't kind of want to get into too much, but certainly come playoffs, we see it every year where players are playing through all sorts of pain, all sorts of sort of little injuries that are, that have been niggling away at them from 82 games of hard compete, and it kind of raises a little bit of a player safety issue for me if all of a sudden, you know, whether it be cross checking or boarding or like interference calls are kind of going miss, and it's giving some of those players who are maybe a little bit dirtier in their play. It gives them a bit more of a license to cause a bit more damage, and that's and obviously that's not good for the game. You don't want to see guys getting injured and being taken out of playoff situations. But yeah, I think certainly when you talk about players like Brad Marchand, he's a great guy to have in the playoffs. It's like, yeah, because he gets away with a whole bunch of shit that he doesn't get away with in the regular season.
Yeah.
That's kind of one of the reasons why he's so effective in the playoffs in terms of getting under the other team's skin and things like that. It's like, yeah, because he's just slashing at your shins for the whole game and it's going kind of completely unnoticed. I mean, if I
They
was to
called
ask,
it. I mean, you see the social media phenomenon of Department of Panthers safety in the past few years, isn't it? Because of obviously maybe bitter fans who don't want to see them win year in year out, as it were. But it's that same respect, isn't it? That people notice that and get on board with it, whether it's rightly or wrongly. And if we had a bit more consistency potentially than across the season, whatever, then you could sort of rule out that argument. Though I do think people will still chime in about that.
yeah, and I know there's a bit of a conversation to be had, isn't there, where it's like, should officiating become sort of tighter and more strict within the playoffs? But for me, just call it the same the whole year. Like, it's just remain consistent. The game being played on the ice, it's no different to how it would be during the regular season. It's just call it the same. And these things kind of all sort of balance out, and yeah, things might get missed here and there. Obviously that's the human nature of it, but I just think kind of turning a bit of a blind eye to stuff that happens is kind of borderline negligent for me.
Yeah, some stuff like this happens similarly in the NFL as well. And I know the NFL in the off season they have a committee that reviews the rules and they make changes every so often and things like that. But it's a pretty common fact in the NFL. Like, if a call or if a play doesn't go or isn't called correctly by the refs, it comes under so much more scrutiny under the playoffs, and that can actually be the driver of change. You have countless of the same decisions made in the regular season, and they don't matter. If it doesn't happen in the playoffs, nothing gets changed. If it happens in the playoffs, things change. And I think it's the same with hockey in terms of they're almost scared to officiate it too much in case they therefore have an impact on the game, but also by not calling plays, they're also having the same impact on the game itself as well, the other way around.
Yeah, it's certainly. God, my brain's like working way harder than I expected it to today. But just in terms of trying to sort of unpick the whole thing, I don't know. I just find it kind of really strange. Right, so just kind of moving into the next section, kind of another sort of aspect I wanted to talk about, and again, it's something that I think raises a lot of talking points over the course of the season. And this is something where there is a lot of parallels, I think, to a lot of other sports here. And that is with video review and challenges. Obviously, you've got VAR in the Premier League, you've got video review in the NFL. Again, I'm not going to pretend to be sort of a know-it-all of the NFL. It's very sort of limited. from what I understand, there seems to be contentious points raised pretty regularly in the NFL with things like catches and things like that, where it's like, did it touch the floor, did it not? And you've got your video review, and they are going frame by frame. And for me, I think that's sort of not what video review is there to do. For me, it should be there to kind of assist the referees in pointing out things that they've clearly missed. But I think when you're going sort of frame by frame, it just becomes a whole other different kind of kettle of fish, so to speak.
Yeah, I have pretty strong views in this regard, and when we're going to be asking for consistency from referees in terms of fast hockey play, um, obviously that's a very tricky thing to have. So to request consistency in refereeing, you need to provide them with support. Now we're in the 21st century. Now we're in 2026. The craziness of technology these days is outstanding. Now, I know in the NFL route that they obviously they're catching whether they've gained the yards that they're meant to have gained, but in hockey it's stuff like offsides and things like that, and we'll get on challenges and things like that as well. But if determining if a play is offside or not, and we're going frame by frame, juttery image by juttery image, we're in 2026, Matt. Like, surely we can put a chip in a puck. Surely we can put chips in players' boots. Surely we can put scanners on the side of the ice which monitor the lines, and the review can take 10 seconds because you can see what crossed the line first. Like,
Yeah,
it doesn't have to be like that. That's the thing is for me, the use of technology. We're using video review, but then still using flawed humans to check it out. Like,
yeah,
why
yeah,
why is it taking so long? Just put chips in stuff like that. I'm not a technological person. I don't know all the computery science or whatever, but there's got to be stuff out there. We're performing brain surgeries and things. I don't know. It's just nuts to me.
yeah. No, I mean, I completely agree, and I know that they've tried it in the past in kind of like the off season with like putting like a little chip in the puck, for things like trying to help it track better on TV and things like that. So that you put a little chip in the puck, and what it allows is that during a TV broadcast, like the puck can almost like glow a little bit, so that you can see it a bit better. But then the players were like, "Nah, the puck feels different. Like it feels different. Don't like it." And it's like, well, like what do you want here? I mean, for me, when it comes to like the offside, aspects, when you break it down, like why is the offside rule in place? In hockey, it's to stop people basically goal hanging, for lack of a better word, and people gaining a distinct advantage over the opposition to be in behind the defenseman and to be in an advantageous scoring position. For me, if you are trying to make a decision about whether a player is offside and you are having to break it down into like micro frame by micro frame, and it's whether a player's the toe of their skate is millimeters over the line, what advantage are they actually gaining from that? I think you would be really, really hard pressed to say, oh yeah, the forwards gained an undeniable advantage there over the opposition because his skate blade was 3 millimeters over the line. I just don't
You're
see.
going into the subjective route there, though. You're going into the subjectiveness note of what is an advantage, what isn't an advantage. If the rule is the attacking player can't go into the offensive zone before a puck, like that is the fucking rule. Like, you can't just give him
Well, yeah,
how
and
much leeway is it?
I suppose so, and like, yeah, like, but in that regard, then, kind of with what you said, like putting cameras at either end of the at either end of the blue line, or yeah, having some sort of chip in the player's skate or a chip in the puck. I completely agree with you in the aspect of like, you look at technologically what we're able to do on planet Earth, and I can't believe that it is something that is still it still takes the amount of time that it does, and that's another aspect of video review, is it takes so long, man. And
Yeah.
the reviews themselves, it kills the momentum of the game quite often as well. Like whilst they're reviewing it, again, the fans in the arena are kind of oblivious to what's going on as well. There's just like a multiple minute break whilst they speak with the situation room in Toronto and decide about what's going to happen or what's not. And it just feels like the whole thing could be streamlined. I don't know. Maybe the NHL needs some sort of massive like tech bro from Silicon Valley or something to invest millions into the NHL and say, "Nah, this is how we're going to do it." Because it's just I think certainly it takes away from the fan experience of those who actually attend the games.
Yeah.
I think obviously the fans watching at home, they get to see the frame by frame stops and everything, but the guys who actually kind of pay the money to be in the door and be in the building are kind of just sat there with their thumb up their ass for like 3-4 minutes whilst they kind of make a decision, and quite often the decision they end up coming to, quite often still ends up feeling wrong regardless.
Yeah. I mean, I know one reason why they probably don't want to include technology and delay these reviews is because they can squeeze in another advert break.
Yeah.
But no, it does stress me out when it's just you can't put in you can't ask ChatGPT if this like interference call is a penalty or not, because it could be, again, that is a more subjective call. But things like if a puck's actually gone in or not, or if offsides, or if there's a bench penalty, stuff like that. Like these things are clear cut. Why are we messing around with these frame by frame shots by people who are miles and miles away who aren't at the game? It just doesn't make any sense to me. It's just one of them frustrating things, really. Where put more tech. This is a multi-billion-pound company. Like, invest in some tech in your sport, for God's sake.
Yeah, and I think that ultimately, it would if it's going to improve and make sure that the right decision's made every time, then surely that's an investment worth doing. But yeah, I don't know. Like, I think video review, I think it as well. It gets obviously used for goalie interference and things like that as well, where you're going frame by frame to see that if someone's brushed against the goalie ever so slightly on a shot, and it's, I mean, goaltender interference for one. I mean, I could talk for an hour on goaltender interference. I don't think anyone actually knows what goaltender interference is anymore.
No.
It just seems to be so kind of subjective, and you'll see it on one night. Something will get called as goalie interference, and then more or less a carbon copy play happens the next night, and they just go, "Yeah, no, that's good. Yeah, good goal." And it's like, well,
Yeah.
and again, that's the human aspect. That is that kind of that referee's interpretation of the rule, but it's still, I think, frustrating from the fans' perspective. I mean, fans getting screwed over by referees is a problem as old as time. But I just think that we have the capacity to reach the correct decision quicker and more consistently. Yet we're just kind of not. We're just sort of leaving it be. Yeah,
It's a difficult. It is a difficult one because, like, with these subjective calls, I'm setting my view on the basic calls, like offside, that it should be clear. There's no excuse for that to be as long as it takes. When you're having these goaltender interference, it does get a bit more challenging to officiate. That there are some clear. Well, I think we can be a lot better in the system that we're operating right now. Absolutely, for sure. I'm sick of seeing. It happens to Joel Eriksson Ek a lot when he's screening the goaltender and a defender will just back into Eriksson Ek or something like that, and he sort of falls into the goalkeeper and stuff like that, and that gets called, even though Eriksson Ek's done nothing to instigate that. He's just been fallen into. But it depends. What is the right answer? Is it a case of we build an AI bot that can review video and can make a decision based on the rules and stuff we set it, so that it takes out the subjectivity, or do we have one person like not just one department, but simply one person, and they get elected position wise, have to put forward their portfolio and stuff like that, and
Yeah.
we elect a video reviewer, and we just trust in this one person who reviews every incident because they're that way. At least there's consistency in that subjectivity.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, potentially. I don't know. I don't know. I think it's obviously it's a way bigger issue than certainly we have the ability to impact. Um, so the next aspect I kind of just wanted to come to, and again, I'm trying not to kind of go full conspiracy here, but this is something that's applied directly to to my team, the Chicago Blackhawks, and something that I've and again, it's something that is very much kind of on the hush hush, something that we don't really see or is acknowledged, but it certainly feels like a lot of the star players in the game, they get, whether you want to call it protection, whether you call it the benefit of the doubt. um if someone like Sidney Crosby, potentially, I'm air quoting when I say that, kind of, gets tripped, and the defenseman is kind of like, well, no, I didn't trip him. He just kind of like absolutely flopped over my stick. So often you'll see it where the ref goes, well, it's Sidney Crosby, so I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt that he's probably the one who's right here. And it's kind of like you hear it talked about a lot in hockey, where it's like, I've seen it kind of firsthand with Connor Bedard, where people are like, yeah, well, that probably was a slash, but he hasn't really been in the league long enough to kind of earn those calls and earn that respect from the referees yet. And it's like, what? It's just so strange. Whether it's like an unconscious bias from the referees, like, I don't know, but kind of like certain guys, when like they're new into the league, people take absolute liberties with them, because they haven't been in the league long enough. You haven't cut your teeth enough in the NHL yet to be able to earn that call from me, sunshine. It's like, I,
Elizabeth.
I don't know.
Yeah, I know what you mean, and I've had the benefit of maybe watching. I keep watching more of the hockey last night than you potentially, but there is a counterpoint to this, right? So the Sharks are playing Edmonton. They're 3-0 up, and Macklin Celebrini is essentially on a breakaway, and I forgot who the defender was. But the stick kind of goes up high, and Celebrini flinches because he sees something coming towards him. He moves his head, and the refs call a high sticking penalty. Celebrini immediately goes to the ref and says, "No, that isn't a penalty. He didn't hit me. I just flinched, essentially." And the refs all gathered to talk about it and then decided to call the penalty anyway. Now, Celebrini is in. Sorry to compare him to Bedard again, but I think
No, no, no,
it's
no,
fair to
that's
say that
fine.
they're both young stars in this league, and Celebrini essentially got a benefit of the doubt call there, despite the fact he was saying it wasn't a penalty. Now, this touches on sort of the review aspect, as well as well, how there's only certain things that can be reviewed or coaches challenged, and things like that. But for me, that there is something fishy going on, whether it's exactly, I guess, like bias against the big stars, or they're getting more protection or whatever, because Celebrini obviously try not to, but it's just very. There is something fishy about that. It does feel like that does impact calls that gets made, regardless of what people say.
Yeah, yeah, and I think there is yeah, and I don't know if it's just human error or emotion that goes into it. Look, we're talking about Macklin Celebrini here, someone who's having an absolutely sensational season, who has kind of propelled himself into stardom within this league. Um, I'm of the opinion, if Celebrini was, let's say he had 25 points on the season, not 78 or whatever it is he's got at the moment, ridiculous figures at the moment. I don't think the referee would have even called that penalty, even, initially. I think he'd have gone, nah, he's flinched. Um, no, and that's not like a bash on Celebrini or anything like that.
Yeah,
And again, that's only I'm only speaking from my own experience, where obviously, whilst Bedard has had 2 very good years in the NHL so far, but on a really really struggling Chicago team who are generally getting the piss beaten out of them most nights, and as a result, maybe he's not kind of projected into his stardom as much as he would have liked. But yeah, I do think that there is something to be said for, well, it's a star player, so yeah, we're gonna give him the call. But yeah, no, that is interesting, and that kind of extends as well a bit wider to other teams. Like I know that people say that the original six get all the calls, and if you're the opposing team and you're playing the Rangers at Madison Square Garden, it's just going to be impossible to get a call. Or if you're playing in Montreal or in Chicago or Toronto or whatever, then there is a natural bias towards the home team in comparison to if you were, I don't know, smaller market team. If you were, Arizona was the first one that came to mind, but obviously that's not a thing. But if you were Utah,
Yeah.
potentially the referees don't feel the pressure, as much, and maybe they don't kind of get as many of the calls. But again, that's another thing. Again, I'm sure it happens in the NFL. It sure as shit happens in the football. If you think teams play Manchester United at Old Trafford or Liverpool at Anfield, or teams always feel they can't buy a call, at those stadiums.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
For me, on
what,
just on that original six stuff, like I'm not saying that that's exactly your view. Obviously, you're adding commentary to that, but all I would say to the original six thoughts is like, look at where they are in the league at the moment. And
yeah, I mean,
they're
none of
not
them are
coming out
doing
on
great.
So, okay, if they need a bit of help, okay, maybe they do.
But then again, is that them evening?
Yeah,
Is that them evening the game out? Like,
it is.
it's so strange, and I think it's yeah. I mean, Christ, I mean, this is we are far from conspiracy theorists. I know I've had to preface that like 3 times. I'm not saying that there's some sort of like you know, kind of like internal NHL conspiracy with all the referees and stuff. I'm just saying what I've seen from watching hockey now for like the best part of a decade. It's something that's always kind of been consistently a thing, and I don't necessarily, in terms of like the natural inconsistencies, I don't necessarily think that teams are getting like a legitimate bias, but again, that's what happens when a game's refereed by people. And I'm not saying by any stretch of imagination I want the game to be refereed by robots, but yeah, I think there's just the human element and emotion, whether it be pressure or the fans getting on your back or anything like that. Yeah, I just think it's certainly made for interesting conversation, I think.
Yeah, I might. It's all this conversation about referees and are they getting it right and all that stuff. And I'm a big proponent of get the simple stuff correct, and then let's have more conversations about the subjective cause for it, because I think it'll always be the case. I don't think there'll ever be, and we're going to touch on it a bit more in this next segment. But is there any chance of any sport getting to the position where people are happy with the way it's officiated? Probably
No,
not.
well, I think that people are just like biologically miserable anyway. So I think that even if, you know, I think people are just fucking miserable, regardless. So yeah, I don't think anyone's ever going to be fully happy with anything. Um, but that kind of leads you into like our final point. If there's like anything that you would change, and I'm going to ask. Well, I'm going to sort of throw out my whether you call it fix or something. For me, all I want to see is let the referees make the calls. Let them make the calls on the ice, no problem. But if there's a call that's somewhat contentious, after the game, I want to hear the referee speak to the media and explain why they've made that decision. That's all I want, because I think that would soothe a lot of ruffled feathers, so to speak. In terms of if people are like, why on earth have they made that that call? And then the referee comes out after the game and says, look, this is what I saw. This is what, I believe to be the case. And as a result, I've called a penalty for that reason. Yeah, there's still going to be people who are pissed about it. But I think a lot of people would probably just be like, yeah, okay. Okay, I don't necessarily kind of agree with it, but at least they've come out and explained it. And I think what you end up getting is like a statement from the referee's body, like the next day. What obviously once they've had time to kind of sit and think about it, and just all I want is just like an explanation from referees. If they make like a decision that's slightly contentious, just back it up and stick to your guns.
Yeah, I think the vast majority of, like, I guess the obvious missed calls are obvious missed calls, like, and that leads me on to a secondary point I'm about to make. But the vast majority of people are upset at decisions made by referees because they go against their team, and regardless if some non-PR trained referee comes out and explains his decision making, that isn't going to appease that team's fans to certain respects. But for me as well, it's just the league has a hard time accepting when they've made a mistake. When there is a missed call that's had a negative impact on a game, if they come out and say, look, that was a missed call, like, and just own it, and accountability that way, that for me would make that big difference, because we all know people make mistakes if they make mistakes, but it's such a polished league, and they want to represent themselves as infallible for a lot of ways. So that's why we don't get refs talking about it, because it's just they were right to make that call.
Yeah, and I suppose that's like the NHL saying, we're backing the referees that we have. We're going to trust them to make that decision. No, they don't need to come out and explain themselves to you, mere peasants, because we trust the decision they've made, and they don't owe you shit. Right? Yeah. Okay. Fair. And kind of another point, or another kind of suggestion I wanted to float with yourself. And again, I know it's something that with a lot of sports they kind of say, why can't it just be a lot more like rugby? Now, again, I'm a casual rugby fan. I'll watch it if it's on. I'll go to the odd game every now and then. But in rugby, the referees are mic'd up all the time. And not just, I mean, I know obviously the NHL refs they're mic'd up when they're announcing a penalty call on a decision, but you are seeing it within the game. You're seeing it constantly, and they're explaining on the spot to the players. Again, they're explaining to the players why they've made that decision. And I think what that ends up leading to, I don't know if it's just like a rugby culture thing, but I think that the players respect the referees a lot. In rugby, they won't sort of give them too much jip, for a couple of reasons. One, because they're explaining their decisions to them, but also they're within sort of earshot of that referee's microphone, and it's probably not a good look for them if they just sit there and like abuse the shit out of them. But like, yeah, what are your thoughts on that? In terms of kind of having referees mic'd up for the whole game.
Yeah, I'm all for that. I mean, all you need to do is watch a YouTube video of a referee, a little small Welsh referee called Nigel Owens, who
Oh,
I think he's like 5'7" or something, and he's got
absolute
like a
Dom.
6'6", and he's just like telling these rugby players off like they're school children, and it is absolutely fantastic. Um, Now, no doubt, the referees will explain to players the decision they made and why they've made it. Why don't they just air it out, kind of thing? Like that. That to me makes more sense than like a post game news conference for them explaining why they've made their decisions, because you can hear it in real time. You can see the player's reaction. It'll suddenly make a lot more sense into the context of the game. Because if you've ever been to I know you have and I have, but those who are listening who've never been to like an ice hockey game, you can't really hear anything that's said on the ice. Even when you're on the watching football, sometimes you can catch a player shouting something sometimes, but when you're in the crowd at a hockey game, you can't hear anything really on the ice that's been said or talked about. So
Yeah,
I absolutely agree that should be how it's done, because we want, and I think the issue we'll come up with is that because we're fighting. No, this is a sport that allows fighting. it's a very physical sport. There'll be choice words said. I know if a puck hits me at 88 miles an hour, I'm likely to yell, "Ah, fuck!"
Yeah.
And you maybe don't want that getting picked up on the ref's mic. So maybe that's potentially a reason why. But in terms of just decisions making, whether they flick it on or off, I don't know. Right? But yeah, I'm in agreement.
Yeah, and I just think as well, like you said, I'm sure referees explain the decision to the players at the time, but if is Brad Marchand likely to say to a referee that his call is absolute bullshit if he's stood right next to him and he's mic'd up and he's telling him? I would go to say probably. I mean, that would be a hell of a trial period, wouldn't it? I mean, for the first few weeks, you would just have guys getting fined left, right, and centre for just mouthing off at the referee on full microphone audio. But yeah, I think it would kind of bring in a bit more less confrontation for the referees, which then potentially in turn could then sort of diminish the need for those kind of for those even out calls. If you've got one team's player that every time you're giving a penalty to their team and they're kind of saying that is absolutely ridiculous, you're an absolute joke, yada yada yada, that it kind of it prevents that
Backs up
subconscious
their
being.
Taylor Hall misconduct.
Yeah, yeah, it kind of prevents that seed being planted in the ref's head of, oh god, well, yeah, I have just called 3 penalties against that team, I probably need to kind of even this out a little bit. I don't know. That would be my fix. Is be more rugby.
Yeah, be more rugby. There's a saying that I don't know whether you've heard it, but football is a gentleman's game played by thugs, and rugby is a thug's game played by gentlemen.
Yeah,
Um,
and ice
maybe,
hockey's a game played by borderline psychopaths.
oh, absolutely, yeah, absolutely. That's
Playing
why
on
we
the
love it,
hardest
though, Matt.
playing on the hardest surface in the world with knives on the bottom of their feet. Shout
Yeah,
out to Thad Castle for that analogy. It's yeah, like it's I mean, it's certainly not something that you could unpick in a 45-minute conversation. But god damn it, we're gonna try. But yeah, I mean, those would be some fixes. But I mean, I think just to kind of tie a cute little bow on this. In terms of obviously we've both been watching hockey for a few years now. Like, do you think refereeing's kind of getting better? Do you think it's getting worse? Do you think it's about the same? Um, like, what are your? I do have a thought on this, but I'm kind of just eager to hear sort of your sort of closing thought.
I think it's not got significantly up or down, but I do think it's lagging behind the improvement of the sport and both essentially quality of and the speed of the game, but also it's lagging behind again the technological aspects, the fact that everyone there's more eyes on the sport than ever. It's a growing sport.
Mm.
I think there's certain elements where they are lagging behind compared to where they should be.
Yeah, yeah, I would agree with that. I would agree with that, and I'd say my only kind of other point I was going to add was, I don't think that refereeing has got kind of significantly worse or significantly better. I just think the scrutiny is at like an all-time high. I think you think with things like social media, the coverage that we have now on like your live broadcasts, like within the studio itself, the scrutiny there is amped up. I think, yeah, like you say, every clip of a contentious refereeing decision gets clipped up, put on X, put on Instagram, put on TikTok, what have you. And I just think there's a lot more scrutiny that way. So I think it probably appears to the outside person that refereeing is getting worse, but I think overall there's just more people bitching about it.
Yeah, power of social media, and that's an untold element as well in terms of having the referees being held more accountable, as it were, because the more we amp up the referees and include them in our sport in terms of presenting them in front of the media and stuff like that, they're only going to get hate no matter what.
Yeah.
Social media, like stupid stuff like death threats and keyboard warriors and things like that. In actual fact, these are just people who choose to try help referee this sport. Such a difficult job to do. Um, and for all those keyboard warriors, and even us too, I don't think I fancy being a ref in ice hockey in any way, shape, or form. So for us telling them how to do their job better, I think it's a bit rich from us even. And we're the ones trying to speak nicely and provide some constructive conversations about it. Never mind the vitriol that there is online and oftentimes in person at games for referees.
Yeah, yeah, that's I could not have put that better myself. I think that is that is a perfect kind of closing point there, Nathaniel. Good job, man. Good job.
Oh, thanks. Put myself on the back.
Um,
I'll hold a press conference to explain my decisions after.
yeah. Is there anything further from yourself, mate, or shall we wrap this up?
No, that's good for me until we watch some games over the weekend and get annoyed again. But no.
Yeah. um, yeah. Well, say thanks as always for being here with us, guys. We'll be back at the start of next week with another week of NHL action to break down and analyse, kind of as we last couple of games before the Olympic break, and then we're into full Olympic coverage mode, and I can't wait. But in the meantime, guys, you can find us and follow us on X and Instagram at the PBP Podcast. You can also get in touch with us on Gmail at penaltyboxperspective@gmail.com. If you've got any thoughts, feelings, or questions, or anything you want us to cover on the show, if you've got any thoughts on refereeing, let us know. Give us a shout, and if there's anything you want to chip in on the conversation, then let us know. If you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, if you can take a moment to give us a 5-star review as well, always helps us out and brings us more into the forefront of the sports podcasting world. We're kind of getting we're getting our feet under the table a bit more with this now, and loving every second. So if we can bring it to more ears, then that would be absolutely massive. You can also find us on YouTube at the Penalty Box Perspectives YouTube channel if you want to go and listen to the podcast in audio format there, and subscribe to the channel there as well. But as always, guys, thanks for being with us. Thanks for being on the ride, and we'll be with you with the next one.